Hello Cherry Pies, thank you for joining me for this video. It's been a while since I've been on YouTube for various reasons, but essentially I just felt like I needed a little bit of a break from YouTube. I am glad that I gave myself an opportunity to step away from video making for just a short time, and it's really nice to be back in the saddle. I would like to read you some of my poetry today, and I would also like to talk to you about creativity, about creative flow, about getting ideas. I want to talk about getting stuck. I want to talk about comparison. So hopefully some of the tips that I give in this video will also be of use to you. You do not need to be a poet or a writer to get something out of this video, I don't think, although obviously because I'm going to be intersplicing the advice and the thoughts that I have with my own poetry, it would help if you enjoy listening to poetry. Although none of my poems are overly long, so you're not going to be sort of, sitting through a really epic poem or anything, but there's going to be quite a lot of poetry reading in here, so if that's not your bag, I will understand if you want to click off. I'm going to have a sip of coffee, and then I think I'm going to begin with a poem. I don't know what poems I'm going to read. I am quite a prolific writer of poetry, so I'm just going to let myself flick through and see what I feel like reading. You can get a taste for the kind of poetry that I write. I might talk a little bit about what the poems are about, what they mean to me, what kind of mood I was in when I wrote them. And I'm also, as I said, going to be talking about things that have helped me as someone who writes, someone who has been writing poetry for a really long time now, on and off for absolutely years. And I used to write short stories as well, especially sort of like flash fiction, microfiction. I don't necessarily do that so much anymore. I am definitely solidly a poet, and I really, really enjoy it. And I also read a lot of poetry. Oh, I'm excited about this. Let's do it. Let's begin. This poem is called My Church on the Blood. This is my church on the blood, the place where two-dimensional rock stars ooze liquid gold and the white smoke luxuriates through the neon hallways to the heavy bass of my weirdest beliefs. Women come in elaborate fabrics, machinating, concocting, always the ultimate plot to raise old icons up from the dead. Tombs tinkle as the skeletal arms which knew all the moves insist upon a grotesque freedom. It is lively here. Even the children's hands open up like spatulas to receive the blessings. The eyelids close for business. They know rock-hard litany which clangs through the bodies of the pipes. This is my church on the blood. This is the place the townsfolk come to have sigils tattooed on their hands and feet, and they squeeze their hearts for the singing milk and leave it glinting in the offering bowl. And outside, birds fly willingly into waiting arrows and crash into circles of feathers in passionate sacrifice. Red-brown leaves hum like returning memories around the big oak doors. Nature knows this place is here. Nature bows its head respectfully. Nature witnesses my efforts. My church on the blood can never be the same as yours. 1,000 royal families could weep 1,000 tears and travel 1,000 miles east and never give rise to what I have built, because I am the only one. You cannot step in here and don my robes and do my thing. Your gods call on you to build your own home. Bleed for it, and it will be yours forever. I wrote that poem a couple of years ago now, and it is about Russia. It is actually about the Orthodox tradition and about how I felt when I was accessing memories of visiting Orthodox churches and stuff like that. So I was really working off of the vibration and the energy that I got from the Orthodox tradition and Orthodox art and all that kind of jazz. So that's why that poem ended up existing. One thing that I think has helped me immensely with continuing to write over all of these years and keeping some form of writing habit going in one way or another is that I tend to try not to be fussy or prescriptive about how I end up writing. So what is the format that I'm writing in? What kind of style am I writing in? I try not to be too bothered. So if I go through a whole bunch of months where I'm not writing poetry, nothing's coming to me like that, I don't really feel that particular urge, or there isn't a really strong idea, I will definitely be satisfied enough with just journaling, doing little bouts of timed writing, writing lists of things, just like as many creative ideas as I can think of for lists that I could write, that kind of stuff. So I try to just keep the writing habit going. I try to keep well oiled, I try to just write whatever comes to me, and I try not to be too upset if what comes to me is not poetry for a whole bunch of time. I think that can be applied to all kinds of creative stuff. I think that if you dance, if you paint, whatever it is that you do, whatever creative pursuit that you're into, if you crochet, whatever the weather, I think that if you avoid being prescriptive about what it is that you want to produce and the nature and the size of the projects that you want to produce, then you will keep producing. It's only when you get really hung up on thinking that you need to do it a specific way, or it's got to be the next big magnum opus, or it's got to be in some sense bigger and better or more ambitious than the thing that you did before. If you think like that, if you tell yourself that, you're probably going to run into problems, because it's not all the time that you have a massive project on the go. For most people, that's not the reality. That's not really the norm. And I think that we can afford to see that as perfectly okay and part of the whole process. We don't always need to be focusing on the next thing, breaking down the next wall, and pushing ourselves. As long as we are just enjoying the activity, we may not always be growing, we may not always be stretching ourselves, but we're just enjoying the activity. I do get a massive high though from writing poetry and from putting things together and building something in that way. And so for that reason, I also don't wait for the creative urge to come. I've learned over the course of time that it's a bit of a myth that you need to wait for that inspiration and wait to be motivated. The idea that inspiration is just very sort of ephemeral and difficult to grasp, and you need to wait for it, you need to sit there completely powerless and wait for it to arrive before you can really produce anything. I reject that. I reject that out of hand. I just don't believe that anymore. I think that it's possible for me to sit down with my poetry book or a notebook of some kind, or with my notes open on my phone, because I do type things on my phone or on my laptop as well. However I can get it out of me, the format that I'm using to produce the work is not so important. It's just whatever I feel comfortable with in that moment. Usually it will be handwritten, but I do sort of type things up electronically as well. I can sit there with absolutely no strong idea in my head. There's nothing that's led me to urgently need to write something down, and I can decide that I'm going to just write things down anyway and just see if I can cobble something together, see if something starts to spark. I really love that Picasso quotation, inspiration has to find you working. As soon as I read that quotation years ago, I thought, oh, I love that. That really speaks to me. I really believe that that is true. I don't think it's a case of just sitting on my hands or twiddling my thumbs and waiting for inspiration to strike and then being so grateful that it did strike. Because to me, I think that I'm just inviting a sense of powerlessness there, and I'm telling myself that it's not really in my hands, that the creative process is not at all in my hands, and I have absolutely no degree of control over it. It's just something that visits me, and I just feel grateful in this very powerless, hapless way to be given this inspiration, and when it goes, and I'm just bereft and I don't know what to do. I don't really like that narrative, and I think I get to choose a different narrative, so that's what I decide to do when it comes to my writing. I suppose what I'm trying to say is respect the creative urge, but don't convince yourself that you have to wait, hapless and eager, for it to visit you. You can create the circumstances where the creative urge will come to you because you have specifically called it in. And if you don't find that anything really comes together from maybe your half an hour or your hour of doing something in your sketchbook, or trying to write something, or trying to throw a dance routine together or whatever, if you find at the end that there wasn't anything really strong that came out of that, it was hardly a waste of time. It still can be seen as something that was nurturing and something that was helpful, something that was positive for your well-being. I wrote this poem the other day, so this is very recent. I don't have a name for it yet. Begin now the sheet rain of synth. Call forth the hard as fuck incantation. Riot in the blood. Cut my flowered cheek. To listen again and then die in the street. My gift. Yield to me as this sound pumps from undergrowth. Crush the fruit to my skin. Play the track again. Play the track again. Military drum, our shared heart. We move together like no other creatures do. They can never say it's not true. This, the soundtrack to our secret time, wills you to be mine and gently undo. I wrote that while I was listening to Ebony Sky by Young Fathers on repeat, so make of that what you will. This poem is called Upon the Horse's Eyelash. It's a micro poem, and it's one of the latest poems that I put up on my poetry Instagram. So if you want to keep up with my poetry and you want to read more and you want to see what I'm doing in terms of the writing that I'm producing, I will leave the link to my poetry Instagram down below. Upon the horse's eyelash entire hangs the tear of devotion, glass oval filled with maiden rain. Memory's hand, sweet-scented, shuts the stable door. I've got a real thing for horses. Horses have always turned up in my dreams. They turn up in my daydreams. They big time have turned up in my dreams during several phases of my life where they were highly emblematic of what I was going through, what I was turning into, what I was learning. So horses often come up in my poetry. I have definitely been incredibly inspired by various people, various situations and various stages in my life and various locations that I've been to. Though those things definitely have inspired me to write poetry without any doubt. And I might have been going through through somewhat of a drought with poetry. I might have not really been focusing on it. I might have sort of lost my way in terms of what I was producing, and then suddenly kapow, something or someone will come into my life and I will get that overwhelming feeling of wanting to produce and almost being unable to stop myself from producing. It's like wild horses couldn't drag me away from writing. However, at the same time, I think it's very important that I do not give anyone or anything else the power to allow me to write poetry or the credit for the poetry that I produce. And that's something that I've learned over the course of time. And with this latest sort of bout of writing that I've been going through in the last year and a half, I have been so prolific as a poet. I'm 35 years old now, and at the age of 35, I can say that at no other point in the decade of my 30s so far have I been unbelievably so prolific as I am right now. And when I started this latest bout of really hardcore poetry writing about a year and a half ago, it had been after somewhat of a drought with poetry, where I think I'd only written 2 or 3 poems in the last year before that. And because I had this massive urge towards prolificacy, I was very worried that the only reason that that was happening was because of this person that I was drawing closer to and the situation in which we were finding ourselves and all of the new feelings and the biochemistry and everything. So I was like, oh my God, this person is absolutely my muse, my poetic guardian. They are guiding my hand. They are making me produce this stuff. And I was putting myself into a bit of a state of powerlessness about it, because when I drew away from that person and I went to stay in Amsterdam for a few months and everything during lockdown and stuff, I was very concerned that I was going to dry up. I was very concerned that I was not going to be writing poetry as much as I was, or maybe even at all. And that was very much an unfounded fear. I did not need to feel that fear. And it helped me to understand that always when I'm strongest in my creative life is when I remind myself that I am the one in control and I'm the one in charge. Nobody gives me the keys or takes the keys away. And I can write anywhere. I can write in the middle of a beautiful field or in an idyllic English countryside setting, or if I go away to a hotel and it's all beautiful and I have the time and the energy and all of that. Sure, I can do it then, but I can also scribble something into my Samsung Notes while I'm in the back of a cab or on the train. I can write anywhere. I can get an idea for a poem in the queue to buy groceries. It's not about needing this overblown location or this very deep connection with someone or whatever the case may be. Those things do not give me the keys to my identity as a poet or to the energy and the beauty and the wonder that I feel when I'm writing poetry. I already have the keys. I was born with them. I will die with them, and I will never be bereft of them if I don't want to be. And that's something that I will say is, don't ever give anyone or anything the power over your creative life. Don't tell yourself you need that in order to make it fly. Sure, over the course of time, you might need to change the way that you are creative. You might need to change, for any number of reasons, the way that you produce creatively, either because you feel moved to or because your situation changes and so you need to try it one way or you need to try it another way. But ultimately, it is yours. It is your journey. It is your intention that you're working with. And you don't need to believe that somebody else lets you through that door. The door is in your house. It's in the house of your psyche. It belongs to no one except you. This next poem is called Gift Shop, Coffee Shop. And essentially it's about the choice that you have in the perspective between thinking of something as really meaningful or thinking of something as totally negligible. Beginning with an eye on the changing fireplace, the breathing flicker, antlers, advancing eels gravitate. A dress of joy, so warm to visit, now cuisine of guilt ready for you to savour. Morning after, take care not to stir up very early sound. See the lone ceramicist who does nurse the course of history. To the kiln, the tooth of truth, fight without fear. Muchly deep event, of course, important, naturally. Bring the car around, gift shop, coffee shop, goodbye forever. How sad we miss the one wing that encircles the breath of all ages. I don't have a title for this next poem yet that I'm about to read you, but it's about being heartbroken in Amsterdam and doing a bit of sightseeing. Shimmy to my dark electric stuff while I dress 3 boys with one hand in the hallway. Pull their uniforms of snow, smart, taut, exact, that they may be regarded by the merchants as my perfect sons. Follow always the everything staircase, up to where the stout organ would be still until its dusty pink tongue filled the night. Play lost games in the private house, whose black marble motor of symmetry stuttered its blue birds, shaking the tiles entirely to breaking. support in coldest water my two hands, wringing the wing of the cloth of the thing called love, and bring the birchwood hearts of witches to be weighed. Praise life's elegant design, although a boiled body is hauled from the canal's tilted bend. New pieces to admire each week, some oak and some veneer, all only ever as warm as the turning page. I don't actually own my earliest poetry anymore that I wrote when I was sort of like 9, 10, 11, 12. I had a few books, A4 books, filled with poetry, and most of it was love poetry. The majority of it was love poetry, although I had never been in love. But I could not stop thinking about it and imagining it and turning it over in my head. I was really fascinated by love and relationships and connection and romance and stuff and intimacy, and I could not wait to grow up and actually experience that and throw myself into that full throttle. And you know, I have no regrets. I was absolutely right. It is exhilarating. It's certainly not the only exhilarating thing to do with your time, but I was definitely gripped by it from an early age, this idea of colliding with somebody, you know. And so I would write about that even though I had no practical experience of it yet. So that's quite interesting. And I think that's one of the reasons that I decided to rip all of those pages out at a certain point and recycle them and just forget about it and not keep those earliest examples of my poetry. I remember a lot of it anyway, not by heart, but I remember the themes, I remember the kinds of things I was writing and the style that I was going for in those early days. However, I do have a lot of poetry from, I would say, around 2008, 2009 to right now. I have a lot of poetry from that time. So it's like a decade's worth of poetry that I have that I can look back on. And this is where I want to talk a bit about excavating your body of work with interest and with non-judgment, instead of looking back over what you've produced before and sort of cringing and groaning and being like, oh no, that was not good, that was not my best stuff. I personally think it's okay to basically see your creative life as being constantly on its own edge. It's constantly leading itself forward and finding that next location and going to that next place, sort of winning that next trophy, if you will. And so obviously when you look back at your previous body of work, hopefully you're going to find some parts of it that you're impressed by or happy with or whatever, but there's going to be a lot of feelings of like, oh, that was a bit rough cut, or that could have been better, or I understand so much more now about the way I want to do things that I would not have produced that now. I produced it then and it was relevant for then and I was on my own edge right then in that moment, but now this is not what I'm producing. That's actually normal, and I think we need to look back at our body of work with excitement and interest and a feeling of love for who we were in the moment when we created those things, rather than looking back with this very intense judgment and this embarrassment and this desire to throw it all away and all of that. And you know what? You can throw all of your work away or never watch it or listen to it or look at it again or expose it to anybody. You do not have to keep your work. You do not need to honour the legacy of that work. You do not need to be interested at all in your body of work if you don't want to. You can absolutely put it all on the pyre once a year or just never think of it or look at it again if you don't want to. But I think it's fair to say that a lot of people do want to go back over their body of work, and I just want to encourage you to do so from a place of interest and from a place of honouring the journey that has brought you to this place right now, instead of being like, ugh, you know. And I think we all do get those ugh kind of moments where we sort of recoil and we're like, oh, this isn't really, you know, what I want to associate with where I am with my work now. Like earlier when I read you guys the 2018 poem that I wrote about the Russian Orthodox tradition, there are just too many joining words in there. I don't like the amount of ands and thes, and I mean, I'm a bit of an and the kind of a poet. I don't shy away from those words. They have an important place in the structure and they can also add an interesting rhythm, as far as I'm concerned. But sometimes I read back over old stuff and I'm like, oh, I really just want to cut all of that out, you know? But I leave it the way it is because it's done now, it's past. And for what it was at the time, it was something that I wrote, and I look back over it at the time just after writing it and I thought, God, that's riveting. I've really broken through there. And I wouldn't write that now and feel like I'd broken through necessarily. I do still think it's very much my style. It's not like I've completely departed from that style, but I definitely wouldn't write something like that now. I try to make it a bit more sparse and punchy, and it wouldn't be quite so flowery, you know? But I honour it for what it was then because it brought me to the point that I'm at now, and I really want to honour that. I want to honour the journey. I know it can be difficult to do sometimes, but I think that as much as we can encourage ourselves to do that, we really should. Definitely avoid telling yourself that the only reason that you should do anything creative is to make money from it. Basically, do not slip into the capitalist agenda. Create because it is good for you. Create because it makes you feel alive and energized and potent and enlivened. All the good stuff. And even in the parts where creativity is tough, and it can pull up, these massive trawler nets of feeling that you have to go through, and there's all kinds of things in there, and it's like, that can be difficult. I think blocks can be difficult. I think comparison can be difficult, all of those things. But as much as those things come and sort of put spanners in the works and make you feel a little bit at odds with yourself, the payoff is grand. The payoff is grandiose. Don't give it to this small idea that the only reason that your creativity is good for anything is if you can make money from it. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't ever make any money from it, obviously, but be very considered about how you feel the relationship is going to work between what you produce and what you earn. For me, whenever I get bogged down in this feeling of what am I doing and why am I doing it and what is the meaning, what is the purpose, what is the bigger ambition, what is the greater aim, I always go back to that inner child work. I think about why 6-year-old me wanted to sit and write in a notebook or make art or whatever, because I work on collage art as well. And I'll leave down below actually an old flip through of an art sketchbook that I had so that you can see what kind of stuff I produce. I think about 6-year-old me. I think about what she wants. I think about the fact that she feels nurtured and held and safe and calm and all of those beautiful things when she is allowed to be in the process of creativity, when she is about the business of writing and drawing and painting and all of that good stuff. She feels better. And that alone is enough of a fucking reason. I don't need to attach it to anything to do with earnings or to do with accolades or to do with any of that stuff. I'm just going to be totally frank. At certain points in my life, I have been very, very low. Very low. I have been suicidal. I have self-harmed. I've struggled a lot with mental health issues. It took me a long time to come to the point I feel I'm at now. And I think if at any point I would have allowed myself to be swept away on this idea that there's no point in me writing poetry because it's just me writing poetry and I'm not even showing it and I'm not even putting it in a book and I'm not even getting it published and nobody even knows about it. If I let myself be swept away on those complexes and that idea that it's not good unless you're exposing it and you're making money from it or you've got an audience around it, I don't know if I'd still be here. I genuinely don't. I know that seems maybe heavy-handed and a bit of an extreme thing to say, but I'm coming at you with the intensity with this one because I really believe it's true. I believe that you have to honour the will that you have to create and the need that you have to create. And it has to be quite apart from what you think anybody else thinks you ought to be doing with it or what the capitalist machine is sort of insisting insidiously always that you should be doing with it. I'm talking about sacred rebellion right now. I'm talking about rebelling against this messaging and doing it for your betterment, doing it for your well-being, doing it for your own fucking peace of mind. Never mind anyone else. This poem is called Deep Sweet House. Carefully trust this deep sweet house, fenced off from blue sacrifices, allowing skin to roar alone here, voice to tumble into a tall glass to be consumed. Know the house, the body you thought you couldn't have, deliberately follow its lizards of love down the hallways, kiss the skull ceiling, thank the glass teeth. In the fattened garden, take pagan communion. Slip into the bath of easy choices, chairs of escaping truths, up into the attic of cosmic investments, down into the basement of deleted numbers. Appreciate the winking apples frozen in the blood bowl. Say yes to the painting's face, daring to disagree during debate. Carefully, tenderly, lay the key to sleep in your palm, humming against the cacti popping through the kitchen floor. Let your ears hear the letterbox remind you. Leave any time you want. You are free to go. Uncooked flesh tremble. The fridge unplugs itself. Holiness of a changed plan. Solo movie night death popcorn. You are always going to stay. I wrote that poem at a time where I really needed to feel grateful for what I had, and I needed to feel grateful to be in my body, and I needed to come home to myself and remember that the home that I have within me is very strong, even if all around me there seemed to be a lot of chaos and a lot of difficulty going on. I don't have a title for this one yet, it's only a little one. More memories than summer, rich, bloodied, shaped like fear and disgust. His face, the end of the endless day. Clouds the small breaths of demons retreating to the curves of his small ears. Real name distorted, candle burned to the shoreline, drinks fouled with fake love. There's a tiny poem here, it says, This last one filled with sugar before the end. This last one. This last night in Amsterdam. When you belong to something, but it is not yours, and softly it sends you away. Sadness. My little ode to the city that has my heart. Darlings, thank you so much for coming with me on this journey, listening to some of my poetry and listening to my thoughts about the creative process and stuff like that. It has been very nice to get back into the saddle and do this YouTube video for you. I hope it's been helpful. Please let me know down below what your experiences have been with your own creative journey. How are you right now with creativity? Are you going through a rough patch? Are things a little bit dusty and dull for you? Did you feel like there was anything that you could take from what I said in this video, or indeed do you have your own tips for creativity, motivation and flow that you would like to share with my other subscribers? I really enjoy reading your comments and I think they're fascinating. Honestly, there's so many fascinating people with like just really a great grasp on life watching my videos, and I feel richer for it all the fucking time. So thank you so much. I want to let you guys know a few things. First of all, there will be an afterthoughts video that is attached to this that is going out on my Patreon for Pop-Tarts members exclusively. If you want to go over and check out my Patreon, it's very new. It only launched in July. I'm very, very excited about it. I do one-card video readings on there. I do live calls. I give discount codes and I write love letters. So if you want to become a patron, you can go over and check out the 3 different tiers that I have at the moment on offer. The highest tier is the Pop-Tarts tier, and with that I sometimes make afterthoughts videos, and I also do one live stream per month where we can all get together and chat about a specific topic. The next topic that we're going to be talking about is the witchcraft community. So that's going to be a very interesting one, very juicy. So get over there if you want more from me and you want to be involved in the live calls. And as I said, there will be an afterthoughts video attached to this video. So I'm going to be giving away more tips, more advice, and talking more in depth about the creative journey over in the Pop-Tarts Patreon tier. If you would like to have a reading with me to explore your own creative power, get out of your own way and start producing things again and getting that creative juice flowing, I do have a creative power reading in my online store, and I also have a reading called Voice of the Muse, which a lot of people have found very helpful for getting back in touch with their potency and getting moving back on the creative gravy train again. You can also book in for a spiritual counselling session with me. We can talk about creativity, we can talk about blocks, we can talk about all kinds of different things in the course of one spiritual counselling session. I offer 60-minute and 90-minute sessions, and I also offer packages of 3. So I'll leave the links for all of that goodness down below, and don't forget to pop on over to my poetry Instagram and follow me there if you would like to read more of my poetry. So much love until next time, baby cakes. Blessed be. Mwah.